The dust settled around the wagon as it rolled to a stop in front of the sprawling ranch house. Mei Lin clutched her worn carpetbag tighter, her knuckles white against the faded fabric. She had traveled halfway across the world for this, a marriage arranged by mail, a promise of a new life in America. But as she stepped down onto the sun-baked earth of Montana, she realized that promises were as fragile as rice paper in the rain. The men gathered on the porch erupted in laughter when they saw her. Their cruel mirth echoed across the empty plains, and Mei Lin felt her face burn with shame. She understood enough English now to catch the words floating on their breath. Widow, joke, can't believe he actually went through with it. The tallest of them, a man with a graying beard and eyes like chips of flint, stepped forward. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, shaking his head. Jackson actually ordered himself a china doll, and a used one at that. More laughter followed, harsh and cutting. Mei Lin's spine straightened despite the humiliation coursing through her veins. She had been a widow for 3 years, yes. Her husband had died in the railroad camps, crushed beneath tons of rock in a tunnel collapse. She had been 19 then, and the years since had taught her that survival required a steel core beneath silk skin. "Where is Mr. Jackson Reeves?" she asked, her accent thick but her words clear. She had practiced English every day for 6 months, preparing for this moment. The bearded man's grin widened. "Oh, he's coming. Just wanted to see the look on your face when you realized what kind of reception you'd get." He spat tobacco juice into the dirt near her feet. "See, Jackson here lost a bet. Said he'd never marry, especially not some foreign widow. But we got him drunk enough one night, and Billy over there wrote up that advertisement as a joke. None of us thought any woman would actually respond." The words landed like stones in her stomach, but Mei Lin refused to flinch. She had known hardship before. This was just another mountain to climb. The screen door creaked, and a man emerged from the shadowed interior of the house. Jackson Reeves was not what she expected. The photograph he had sent showed a stern-faced man with dark hair and broad shoulders, but it hadn't captured the weariness that seemed to emanate from him like heat from sun-warmed stone. He was younger than she'd imagined, perhaps 30, with a face that might have been handsome, if not for the deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes. He stopped at the edge of the porch, his gaze sweeping over her with an expression she couldn't read. "So you actually came," he said finally, his voice rough as gravel. "I came," Mei Lin confirmed. "We have agreement, contract." Jackson repeated, and something that might have been regret flickered across his features. "Ma'am, I don't know what those letters said, but I need you to understand something. I never wrote them. My friends here thought it would be amusing to play matchmaker while I was indisposed." "Indisposed," she repeated carefully, testing the word. "You were drunk." One of the men howled with laughter. "She's got your number, Jackson." Jackson's jaw tightened, and for the first time Mei Lin saw anger flash in his eyes, but it wasn't directed at her. "Get off my property," he said quietly, his words cutting through the merriment like a knife. "All of you, now." The bearded man's smile faded. "Aw, come on, Jackson. We were just having a bit of fun." Fun! Jackson descended the porch steps, and despite his lean frame, there was something dangerous in the way he moved. "You brought a woman halfway around the world as a joke. You made promises in my name. You think that's fun, Harris?" Harris shifted uncomfortably. "Well, when you put it that way, get out." Jackson's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute finality. The men shuffled away, their earlier bravado evaporating like morning dew. As the sound of their horses faded into the distance, silence settled over the ranch like a blanket. Mei Lin stood perfectly still, uncertain of what would happen next. Jackson turned to her, and she saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "You shouldn't have been dragged into this. I'll arrange for your passage back to San Francisco, and I'll pay for your trouble. It's the least I can do." "No," Mei Lin said. He blinked. "No. I have no home in San Francisco. No family, nothing." She set her carpet-bag down carefully. "I sold everything to come here. Contract says marriage. We marry." Jackson stared at her as if she'd spoken in a language he didn't understand. "Ma'am, Mrs. What was your name again?" "Mei Lin. It means beautiful jade." "Mei Lin," he repeated, and the way he said it, carefully shaping each syllable, sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "You don't want to marry me. You don't even know me. And I sure as hell didn't plan on marrying anyone, let alone—" He stopped himself, looking pained. "Let alone Chinese widow," she finished for him. "I know. Your friends make that very clear." She met his gaze steadily. "But I come too far to turn back. And you make promise, even if you not know you make it. In my culture, promises are sacred. Are they not sacred here too?" Something shifted in Jackson's expression. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. She wondered what he saw. A woman of 22 who appeared younger, with hair pinned in the traditional style and wearing the best dress she owned, which was still worn thin at the seams. A foreigner, a burden he hadn't asked for. "They're sacred," he said finally, "or they should be." He ran a hand through his dark hair, leaving it disheveled. "But marriage, that's not something to enter into lightly." "I do not take it lightly," Mei Lin said. "Do you have bed to spare for stranger? Food? I can work. I cook, clean, so I work very hard." Jackson's shoulders sagged slightly, and suddenly he looked very tired. "I have a spare room, and food. You don't have to work for your keep, not until we figure this out." "I work," Mei Lin insisted. "I not take charity." The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Stubborn, practical," she corrected. He shook his head, but there was no malice in the gesture. "Come on, I'll show you inside. Fair warning. It's not much. This is a working ranch, not a palace." Mei Lin picked up her bag and followed him into the house. The interior was sparse but clean, with worn furniture and bare walls. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and she could see a kitchen area beyond. It smelled of wood smoke and leather and something else, something lonely. "Rooms upstairs," Jackson said, leading her to a narrow staircase. "It was my mother's sewing room before she passed. There's a bed and a dresser, not much else." The room he showed her was small, but had a window overlooking the vast expanse of prairie. The bed was narrow, covered with a faded quilt. A simple dresser stood against one wall, and a wooden chair sat beneath the window. "It's perfect," Mei Lin said, and she meant it. She had slept on hard ground before, in overcrowded rooms filled with the sounds and smells of too many people living too close together. This room had space, light, and a door she could close. It was more than perfect. Jackson lingered in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Look, I'll be straight with you. I don't know what those letters promised, but I'm not looking for a wife. I run this ranch alone, and that's how I like it. But I'm not going to throw you out on the street either. So here's what I'm proposing: you stay here as long as you need to. I'll pay you wages for any work you do. When you're ready, I'll help you get set up somewhere else, maybe in town, where there are more opportunities." Mei Lin set her bag on the bed and turned to face him. "And if I say I want to stay, as wife, not hired worker?" He looked stricken. "Why would you want that? You don't know me. I could be. Hell, I could be terrible, mean, cruel." "Are you?" she asked simply. "No," he admitted, "but I'm not easy to live with either. I'm set in my ways. I like quiet. I don't talk much." He paused. "And people in town, They're not going to be kind about this, about you. They were not kind in San Francisco either, Mei Lin said. Or in the camps before that. I am used to unkindness. She smoothed her hands over her skirt, choosing her words carefully. In China, I was married at 16 to man I met one time before wedding. He was good man, kind, but I not choose him. When he die, his family say I bring bad luck. They send me away with nothing. She looked up at Jackson. Here, I have choice. I choose this. I choose to try. Jackson was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally he said, "Give me some time to think about it. In the meantime, make yourself at home. Supper's at 6. I'll cook tonight, but if you really want to work, you can take over the kitchen. Tomorrow." He left before she could respond, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Mei Lin sat down on the narrow bed and allowed herself to breathe. The journey had been long, and she was so very tired. But she had learned long ago that exhaustion was just another burden to carry, and she was strong enough to bear it. The next few days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Mei Lin rose before dawn, as was her habit, and prepared breakfast. Jackson would emerge from his room looking surprised to find eggs and rice and strong tea waiting for him. He ate in silence, nodded his thanks, and disappeared to work on the ranch. She spent her days cleaning the house, which desperately needed a woman's touch, and exploring the property. The ranch was vast and lonely, stretching out toward horizons that seemed impossibly far away. There were cattle in the near pasture, horses in the corral, and chickens pecking in the yard. Mei Lin had never tended animals before, but she watched and learned. She fed the chickens, gathered eggs, and began to understand the rhythms of this strange new place. Jackson spoke little, but she noticed things about him. The way he was gentle with the horses, murmuring to them in a low voice that she never heard him use with people. The way his shoulders relaxed when he thought he was alone. The way he left wild flowers on a grave at the edge of the property, his mother's, she assumed. On the fourth day, Mei Lin was in the kitchen preparing supper when Jackson came in earlier than usual. She looked up from the vegetables she was cutting, surprised. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "About what you said, about choosing this." Mei Lin set down her knife and waited. "It's not right, what happened. You were lied to, manipulated, but you're right that a promise was made, even if I didn't make it myself." He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "So here's what I'm proposing. We get married, legal and proper, but it'll be a marriage in name only, at least for now. You keep your room, I'll keep mine. We live like business partners. I guess housemates. After a year, if you want to leave, I'll give you enough money to start fresh somewhere else. If you want to stay, we'll figure out what that looks like." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even particularly romantic. But it was honest, and Mei Lin had learned to value honesty above almost everything else. "1 year," she repeated, "and then I choose to stay or go." "Your choice entirely," Jackson confirmed. "No pressure either way. I'll respect whatever you decide." Mei Lin considered this. A year was enough time to build something, even if that something was just stability. And stability was more than she'd had in a long time. "Yes," she said, "I agree to these terms." Jackson nodded, though she thought she detected relief in his expression. "All right then. I'll arrange for the preacher to come out this weekend. We can keep it simple, no need for any fuss." The wedding took place 3 days later in the parlor of the ranch house. The preacher was an elderly man with kind eyes, who asked no questions about the unusual circumstances. There were no guests, no flowers, no celebration. Mei Lin wore her best dress, the same one she'd arrived in, and Jackson wore a clean shirt with his dark hair slicked back. They stood before the preacher, and exchanged vows that felt both binding and hollow. When it came time for Jackson to kiss his bride, he hesitated, his eyes searching hers for permission. Mei Lin nodded slightly, and he leaned in. The kiss was meant to be perfunctory, a formality to complete the ceremony. His lips barely brushed hers, feather, light and careful, but at the moment of contact, something electric passed between them. Mei Lin froze, her breath catching in her throat. Jackson pulled back immediately, his eyes wide with surprise. They stared at each other for a suspended moment, and Mei Lin felt heat flood her cheeks. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with tenderness, even the awkward tenderness of a stranger fulfilling an obligation. Her late husband's kisses had been sweet but fumbling, the kisses of two young people who didn't quite know what they were doing. This was different. This was a man who knew himself, who held himself in careful check, and that restraint was somehow more affecting than passion would have been. The preacher cleared his throat. "I now pronounce you man and wife," he said, and just like that, Mei Lin became Mrs. Jackson Reeves. After the preacher left, clutching his payment and refusing the offer of supper, an awkward silence descended on the house. Jackson disappeared into his study, and Mei Lin retreated to the kitchen. She cooked mechanically, her mind replaying that brief moment of contact over and over. It meant nothing, she told herself firmly. It was just surprise, just the strangeness of the situation. She would not let herself build fantasies around a man who had made it clear he wanted a wife in name only. But that night, lying in her narrow bed and staring at the ceiling, she couldn't help but touch her fingers to her lips, remembering. The weeks that followed were both easier and harder than Mei Lin expected. The routine of running the household gave her purpose, and she threw herself into the work with determination. She learned to bake bread the American way, though she still preferred steamed buns. She tended the vegetable garden, coaxing life from the stubborn soil. She even began helping with some of the lighter ranch work, feeding the animals and mending fences. Jackson remained distant but not unkind. He thanked her for meals, complimented her work, and left money on the kitchen table each week for household expenses. He never touched her again, not even casually. It was as if that wedding kiss had created an invisible boundary between them that neither dared to cross. But Mei Lin noticed things. The way his gaze would linger on her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he made sure to fix the loose step on the porch after she mentioned it once. The way he brought home fabric from town without being asked. The deep blue color of a twilight sky. And she noticed her own reactions to him. The way her heart would lift when she heard his footsteps on the porch. The way she found herself preparing his favorite foods, even though he never requested them. The way she started wearing her hair in a looser style because she'd caught him looking at it one morning when a few strands had escaped her pins. It was dangerous, she knew, to let herself feel anything. The agreement had been clear. 1 year, and then she would choose. She should be planning her exit, saving money, thinking about where she might go. Instead, she found herself putting down roots, making this house into a home. Summer deepened into autumn, and with the changing seasons came the town's annual harvest festival. Jackson mentioned it one morning at breakfast, his tone carefully casual. "There's a festival in town this weekend," he said. "Dancing, food, that sort of thing. We don't have to go, but people might talk if we don't show up at least once, given that we're, you know, married now." Mei Lin understood what he wasn't saying. People would talk regardless, but their absence would give the gossips even more ammunition. "We should go," she said. Jackson looked relieved. "I'll warn you, it might not be pleasant. Some folks in town, they have opinions about foreigners, about Chinese people especially. I know, Mei Lin said quietly. She had experienced enough prejudice to last a lifetime. But I am your wife now. I will not hide. Something shifted in Jackson's expression, a flash of what might have been pride or admiration. No, he said softly. I don't suppose you would. The festival was held in the town square, which had been decorated with bunting and paper lanterns. There was a band playing fiddle music, tables laden with food, and people dancing in the street. As Jackson and Mei Lin approached, conversations died and heads